Welcome to episode 63 of the Sports Geek podcast. On this week's podcast, I catch up with Brad Mayne from MetLife Stadium to talk about the NFL game day experience and the technology needs of running an NFL stadium. And we look back at the NRL finals. Congratulations to the South Sydney Rabbitohs.
Welcome to the Sports Geek podcast, the podcast built for sports digital and sports business professionals. And now, here's your host, who knows sports is a 24/7 business, Sean Callanan.
Thanks, DJ Joel. My name is Sean Callanan from sportsgeekhq.com. Thank you very much for listening to another episode of the Sports Geek podcast. If you're a new listener and you just started listening after last week's episode with Mark Cuban, thank you very much for coming back. And thank you very much for everybody who sent in tweets, emails, texts, and hit me up via Cyberdust. Sean Callanan via Cyberdust or at Sean Callanan via Twitter. Please send me a tweet. Tell me where and when you were listening. It's quite funny with podcasts. They're a real slow burn. Got a lot of feedback when I released the episode with Mark last week. And kudos for getting him and things like that. And then got the true feedback 40 minutes later, or as people started listening to the podcast, or while they were listening to the podcast. So I was really pumped to get that feedback from people who've actually listened. I hope you enjoyed listening to it as much as I did making it. I thought a good way to follow up that interview with Mark would be to follow up with Brad Mayne. I met Brad on my first Sports Geek trip. I've spoken about it before, back in 2010 when he was CEO of American Airlines Center, where the Dallas Mavericks play. And so it was a great night at American Airlines Center. So I flicked Brad a note after doing the Mark Cuban interview just to say thanks. If I hadn't have met Mark on that night and developed my business from that time, things like doing the Mark Cuban interview would not have been possible. So caught up with Brad Mayne earlier today to chat about his role at MetLife Stadium and what he's doing there with the stadium. It's home of the New York Jets and the New York Giants, and recently hosted Super Bowl 48. So have a really good chat with him. That's on this week's podcast. And then also later in the podcast, I'm going to go back and have a bit of a review of the NRL Grand Final with the South Sydney Rabbitohs breaking a 43-year drought to win the NRL Premiership. Really happy to see all of my mates at the Rabbitohs, Jeremy Monahan, Chris Bevan, Tom Skolarakis, and hopefully I got your name right, Tom. They're the digital team behind the Rabbitohs. I've been working with them for a couple of years. We were looking back at the numbers when we started work on the Rabbitohs digital things. They had 8,000 Facebook fans back in 2011, and they just recently smashed through 330,000 Facebook fans. So they've done a remarkable effort, and I'll talk a little bit more about my experience at the NRL, I should say, Grand Final, a little bit later in the podcast. So again, if you're a new listener, please tell your friends. It's a Sports Geek podcast is available in all good podcast stores and even the bad ones. We're on iTunes, SoundCloud, Stitcher, Audio Boo. If you can't find it on the internet, please let me know. Send me either a tweet at Sean Callanan or even send me an email, Sean at sportsgeekhq.com. But first, here's my chat with Brad Mayne, CEO and President of MetLife Stadium. Very happy to welcome on the podcast Brad Mayne, President and CEO of MetLife Stadium. Welcome to the Sports Geek podcast, Brad.
Thank you for having me.
For those who have listened to the podcast before, I've spoken about the time that we met back in 2010 when you were working for the American Airlines Center and you were the CEO there. Do you want to give us a little bit of background of your sports business journey? You've been working in the stadium game for a long time. Do you want to tell us a little bit about how you got started and what you've been doing to get to the point you are at MetLife?
Sure. And Sean, if you'll remember correctly, I think it was the 20,000th point that Swish 41, Dirk Nowitzki, was able to score that night at that game.
Yeah, it was. It was a very memorable night. So I've actually shared the video of Dirk Nowitzki, the celebrations after he's scoring his 20,000th NBA point. So yeah, very thankful for you inviting me up, and quite funnily enough, I just got a message back from Jill Dotz just this morning, replying back to me, saying that she remembers that night fondly as well. So again, thank you very much for that
All
night.
right. Yeah, no, it was great. My career's been long, and I've done quite a few things, but that was great being president and CEO of American Airlines Center. I was brought in at the very beginning of that project, was involved in the design, the financing, the construction, and of course, in my 14 and a half years there, we won a Stanley Cup championship with the Dallas Stars, and then followed that up with a championship for the NBA with the Dallas Mavericks. So I had a great time there in Dallas.
And the thing is, yeah, you were there for the whole time. So you started American Airlines Center in '98, and so you were there when Mark took over the Mavericks. And one of the things he talked about in the chat that I had with him is that he was one of the first guys to bring the tech into the stadium. So that would have been completely bleeding edge at the time in the early 2000s to be putting in Wi-Fi and upgrades into a stadium.
Yeah, and what was great about Mark was because of his background and his knowledge and successes in the information technologies arena. He was such a great resource for us. He was passionate. He was willing to spend the money and do the right thing, but he was also very calculated in what types of technologies he felt would enhance that guest experience and not compete with what was actually happening on the court. So gained a lot of wonderful insight from both the technology side and from the guest experience side from Mark. And he was, he is a very passionate owner, cares very much about the experience that guests have when they actually come to the arena. So, a great time in my career where I was able to learn from one of the best in ownership in any of the major sports.
And so you took over the role at MetLife Stadium, which is, for the people who don't know, it's home of the Giants and the Jets in the NFL. So it's one of the few stadiums that is shared from an NFL point of view. You took over that role in August 2012. What were some of the lessons coming from a stadium that was, again, multi-sport? You had the Stars in the NHL and the Mavs, as well as all the entertainment options at the American Airlines Center, to going to a football focused to an outdoor stadium. What were some of the lessons in that change going to that kind of venue?
Yeah, well, I think one of the reasons I was probably asked to come here is because I had experience in dealing with two different ownership groups, with the Stars and the Mavericks. The difference here, of course, is as opposed to an NHL team and an NBA team that are not competitive on the same field, here I've got two NFL teams that do compete against one another for the same, fans, same broadcast opportunities, and the like. So a little bit different from that standpoint. But the two ownership groups here, the Mara and Tisch families with the Giants, and Woody Johnson with the Jets. The good news is they're very passionate about the guest experience and what takes place in the stadium. They're doing a great job for us. It was interesting. The first full month that I was here was in September, and having been in arenas most of my career, when you had a bad weather situation, you moved people from the exterior of the arena into the seating bowl for protection. Here at the stadium, you move people out of the seating bowl and into the concourses for protection, because usually the bad weather is going to be a lightning storm. In that first month, so we had a NCAA football game with USC versus Syracuse, where we had to move everybody out of the seating bowl, and then we had our third night of Bruce Springsteen, where we had an electrical storm came through. So that was interesting, trying to figure out what the weather was going to do and how long we had to hold on the event, because in an arena, you're inside, you're protected, you can continue the event if it's not too bad of weather. where here you definitely affect the play or the entertainment. You have to hold off and wait until the facility is safe for people to sit in. The other thing besides the weather, when you're working with 82,000 people as opposed to 19,000 people, the enormity of operating a stadium really takes a lot of time and energy, and frankly, it affects the surrounding communities so much more when you're bringing in 23 to 27,000 cars, bringing in 10 to 12,000 people on trains and buses. It definitely has both a challenging effect, but also a positive economic impact on the surrounding communities. So there really are differences in going from an arena standpoint where everything is climately controlled to an outdoor stadium where everything is based on how good the weather is, whether it's raining or freezing or snowing, which we have all of those things happen here in the New York market.
And it was the weather, I think, was one of the big discussion points for the Super Bowl that you hosted in February, where we saw the Seahawks get the win over the Broncos. And we spoke to Kent Olsen about the experience from the Seahawks' point of view of going through that Super Bowl week. What's the Super Bowl week like for the stadium and the host from a point of view of logistics?
It's interesting. We were the Super Bowl of first in many aspects. Number one, it's the first Super Bowl that was hosted by two NFL teams, the Jets and the Giants. It was the first Super Bowl that was hosted in two different states, both in New York and in New Jersey. It was the first cold weather open stadium, so the weather was definitely a very big concern for all of us. And it was amazing that the week leading up to the Super Bowl, we had pipes that were freezing and bursting because normally in January, February, the stadium is closed, and so we're able to winterize the stadium. But with it having to be open and operating, we had some of those challenges. And then, of course, the Super Bowl Sunday came, and people arrived. Some of them were in short sleeves, carrying their jackets with them. And the fact of the matter is, kickoff for the Super Bowl was actually warmer than the first pitch being thrown by the New York Mets on opening day. And then, of course, I left here at 2:30 in the morning after the Super Bowl, and I knew that we had to move everybody out that had prepared for the Super Bowl. So I came back in and arrived at 6 a.m., walked down to the end of one of the tunnels, took the picture of the 5 inches of snow that had fallen in that few short hours, took a picture with my iPhone, tweeted it. Brian Murphy from the NFL picked it up and retweeted it, and all of a sudden my phone went off the hook, and it was all the national media wanting to use my picture for the evening news to talk about the miraculous weather that we had for the Super Bowl.
Yeah, well, you can count your lucky stars for that, because it did turn out to be a terrific day. There was a lot of talk about the weather, but it all came off in the end. Now, you would have had there was a lot of preparation to be ready for the Super Bowl and to upgrade the infrastructure of the stadium from a Wi-Fi and a cellular infrastructure point of view. I spoke to Michelle McKenna-Doyle at Seat, and she spoke about like analyzing how much data that was being used at the Super Bowl. I think it was 3.2 terabytes of data sent by fans from their phones at the game. Obviously, people want to make sure that they send out a photo and send out a tweet and brag that they're at the Super Bowl. What was it like running that project and getting that infrastructure in place? So, again, harking back to Mark Cuban's point of letting the fans use the technology when they want to, but they really want to be part of the game. How was it to run that project and get the stadium up to scratch?
Yeah, it was a benefit for us long term because we had to upgrade the system. And 1 year prior, we began using consultants and different contractors to give us some guidance and direction. Of course, we had the information of how much the IT became a part of the games for prior seasons, prior Super Bowls in each year. The amount of technology that was being used at the games, and it was growing exponentially. And so we just extrapolated out what had happened the 3 years prior, where we thought we needed to be, and fortunately, we were able to take advantage of installing everything here and making it permanent. And that's really been a blessing for us going forward. It's interesting that we more than quadrupled the amount of capacity we have from a Wi-Fi and cellular standpoint in order to take care of the Super Bowl. And when you go from a pipeline that was about 200 megabits to up to 1 terabyte for your pipeline coming in and out, and then all of the additional infrastructure to allow for the downstreaming and upstreaming, the inbounds, the outbounds. It was an amazing experience. And what's interesting is we've proven now with gathering the data that we had, prior to the Super Bowl, we had some guests who were underserved because we didn't have enough capacity to take care of everything that they wanted to do. And now today we do. And we follow that very closely with each one of our games. The scary thing is with the new phones that are coming out, going from the G to the N band, they use up a lot more of the Wi-Fi capacity than the old phones do, and with everybody upgrading and updating their phones. What's interesting, one of the pieces of data that we found is as people come to our events, that their phones, that they've been doing updates to their phones, but it really hasn't fully updated until it arrives here, where the capacity is such that it allows the phones to then do an enormous amount of inbound data to their phones that they otherwise were not getting. And I don't know that they actually understood that that's what's happening with their smartphones.
Yeah,
it's really worked out quite well for us.
Yeah, I'd spoken to John Brams at Extreme, and some of the stuff that the analytics that they've done with their partnership with the NFL was, a lot of fans don't connect to Wi-Fi that often, and so then when they turn up to a stadium, a big chunk of the data that's being downloaded is people updating their apps and updating their operating systems. So I think the sophistication of how the pipeline is offered to fans and blocking that kind of thing. It will be sort of the next phase. And I think the other thing that's different, if we listen to what Mark was saying about what he wants the fans to use their smartphones for, it doesn't fit for basketball, so because it is such action packed. There's no breaks in the action to pick out your phone and look at it. Whereas the NFL, with all the breaks in play, all the TV spots, it really does fit itself to pulling out your phone, checking in on Red Zone on another game because you're not missing anything at the game. So it's a different type of smartphone user that's at an NFL game that would lend itself to be wanting more Wi-Fi.
Yeah, that's true. And the other thing we found is with fantasy sports that many people are participating in, they're paying attention to individuals on other teams, and the amount of access that they need in order to follow how well their team is doing eats up a lot of our pipeline as well.
Yeah. Fantasy football and fantasy sports around the world still seems to be a massive traffic driver for those both in the stadium and outside the stadium. So now you've got the infrastructure there. So now the responsibility is to be able to respond to these fans and give them the information that they want. Like when we were in the dark ages, when people could not connect, a stadium was a little bit hamstrung. You couldn't talk to your fans because they couldn't connect, and that was the problem. But now that problem's been alleviated, you've had to develop a new website for MetLife, and I guess the demands of your staff from a game day, from a communicating with fans in a digital form or using social media, that's grown as you've rolled out more of this Wi-Fi?
Yeah, it really has. And we found social media integration to be very important for us. Taking that guest experience to that next level. Digital and guest services teams work together in making sure that fan experience is really well. And in fact, for quite some time, a lot of the stadiums had the, text this number if you've got a question or a problem. And you'd get the text, and then you'd have to send people to certain areas to handle whatever those questions or challenges were. Now we can actually communicate right directly to the users whenever they have a situation that they need information on or a problem that they want to bring to our attention. We can actually communicate with them in real time and actually be able to resolve the issue in a much better fashion. And that's one thing the NFL has put a very large amount of time and energy into, is that guest experience. And the social media has taken a position that allows us to do that. And of course, without the upgrades on the Wi-Fi and the cellular infrastructures, we wouldn't be able to accommodate as well as we do.
Yeah, I've helped stadiums sort of position themselves from a social media point of view and how they do their marketing, but it's that customer service side, especially on game day, being able to be closely integrated with the stadium operations. So because someone will tweet you that there's a burst pipe in a toilet facility, or that the lines are exceptionally long at a certain hot dog stand. I've helped direct the traffic at the SCG during a big test match and seen that traffic coming in. And if you can respond to those fans and be that customer service, you can really turn around some of those issues and fix them far quicker, because the fans know that they just need to send you a tweet and tell you that there's something the matter, and you can get the stadium operations people onto it. Is that something that that I guess the Super Bowl, there was that social media concierge service that the stadium was part of, as well as with the transport authorities and things like that? Was that something that worked really well because there's a lot of people to direct and give information to on a Super Bowl week? Is that something that worked really well during that Super Bowl time?
Yeah, it has. And what's interesting is, with these different platforms that you can use now, and you can plug in keywords or phrases, and you can watch with the geofencing and other systems, you can watch what's taking place within your stadium and react to people that have no idea that you're actually out there looking for the kind of comments that they have.
Yep.
One of the stories that happened here recently is somebody said something along the lines of, in a tweet, thanks MetLife Stadium for the frozen Knish.
Yep.
And, we immediately tweeted back to him and said, that's not right. Give us more information. And he took a picture of their receipt and tweeted that back to us that showed that they were at the stadium. We tweeted back where he was sitting, and then we sent our guest services folks down to get a good hot Knish and take it right down to their seat for them. And, it really helps us to take challenging situations for our guests and turn it into a real positive and memorable experience, to where they say, wow, I just sent something out into social media and really didn't expect the stadium to respond to it, and yet here they are taking care of the problem in real time. And thank you. I will be a fan forever.
Yeah, and that's the key thing. You're taking what is a negative experience and you're flipping it completely, because the fan becomes a brand ambassador to say, from then on they're using at ML Stadium, and they're telling people what the great experience was. And you can just turn that around, and it is a one-by-one type of process. But as you're building up those advocates, they'll be the ones that will tell their friends, don't forget, tag the stadium. If you have a problem, they will solve it. They're on the case, and then obviously that bar gets set, and that's a bar that, as a stadium, you've got to keep reaching, because if you drop that at any stage, then you start losing those fans.
Correct. And the other thing too, Sean, is we use our platforms to inform. We want to make sure that, for example, people know that there's a particular former player who's allowing you to take a photograph with them and will autograph your football if you've got one, or your jersey. It allows us to talk about pregame traffic coming in. If there's issues on any of the major highways, we can send out a message to tell them there's an accident or construction at a particular location, and give them alternative routes to the stadium. And same thing, on the exit. allows us to send out information to folks as it relates to our building partners and the activation that they're doing. We had Bumblebee from Transformers was here for a couple of events a week ago. And to take a picture of that transformer and show them how big it was and where it was located really turned into a real positive for our building partner, which was MetLife, who had brought in the transformer as part of their engagement with the fans. So it's also setting expectations and informing them of all the wonderful things we have happening at the stadium as well.
And so it is very much a not both a multi-team with the Giants and the Jets, but you have multiple events with this. You've had concerts there, you've had WrestleMania, and recently Syracuse are playing in college. What's the experience like bringing in that college fan base, and has that been received from their point of view?
Yeah, it's been great. When you bring in Notre Dame, they've got a huge fan base all over the country, and of course Syracuse being here locally and all their fan base here in the New York market, and people coming here that normally haven't been to MetLife Stadium. Once again, to be able to engage with them and make that experience really good. And the other thing too is, with our technologies, only here at the stadium, for example, can you use an app that the teams have set up where you can watch the play from different angles with the Yins cams, that you are not able to get if you're not here at the stadium. So if you've got that app, the Yins cam won't work for you because it's actually done through our network here at the stadium. So, again, it's getting people off the couch, getting them here to the venue, and then making that experience great to where they're going to want to come back.
So, yeah, tell us a little bit more about the Yins Cam app, because I'm seeing more stadiums building those specific apps that are effectively a utility for the fan. They tell you, where the parking is and where all the concessions are and those kind of things. But then a lot of them are doing this geofencing type technology. So if you're in the stadium, you might get replays, as you just said there, or extra features, and then also embedding in ticketing. So what are you looking to do with your version of that app?
Yeah, so being able to stream the NFL Red Zone, use the floating camera that like a spider cam that they've got on the cables that are that's flying in the stadium to follow the action, gives you some replay angles of cameras that you otherwise wouldn't get. But the other thing too is it allows us to find out who is coming. With beacons that are set up, we can find out who's coming to the facility, where they're going through the stadium itself, what sort of things that they're purchasing, the interest that they have, and again allows us to make a quality package of that experience specific to each one of those users. And in fact, with this year, the Jets have gone with a new, they're using Fortress, which is using an RFID chip in a card. So if you're a season ticket customer, when you come up to enter into the stadium, it's a loyalty program as well as your entrance into the facility. And we're finding a lot of great things that that new system is allowing us to do, and again, doing what we can to help that guest enjoy themselves and not worry themselves on many of the challenges that they might have in getting into the stadium and going through the security process, et cetera. Gets them in quicker, and then gives the teams the ability to send out special discounts or special experiences for them once they get here.
Yeah, I think that is just the way that is going to go, the mobile tickets and using the RFID technology, but then they're connecting it with the data side of it. So you're able to collect the data, know what your fans are doing, knowing where they're going, and it's not a creepy stalker kind of way. It's you're trying to build a better fan experience. If you're always knowing that certain fans are going to this certain part of the stadium or always using these facilities, you can better put offers or get your staffing levels right at the different parts of the stadium as you start getting this data in.
Yeah, exactly. And it's wonderful that these technologies are there. You have to be careful on how you use them, how you manage them, because if you're pushing too much to the guest, they're going to feel that you're intruding on their experience. So you have to be very careful with these new tools that you have, and not force yourself on the guests as they come to the stadium. And so it's a whole new experience. It's a great tool to use, but it's got to be used correctly.
Just another thing on the stadium. You've got all the technology there from the screens, the ribbon boards, over 2,100 monitors around the stadium, the big Daktronics score display boards at either end around the stadium. Does that give you that ability to flip the switch and it's then a Jets green, and then flip the switch and then it's a Giants blue, and so you can really give that home field feel depending on what stadium it is, because it's now all wired up, and it's just a matter of flicking the switch, and the whole branding and the look and the feel is different for the two different types of games.
Yeah, so there's 32 NFL teams and 31 stadiums, so we're the only NFL stadium with two teams playing in the same stadium. And branding is very important to our team. So obviously there are certain items that we have to physically make the changes on. For example, the end zones. You can't just flip a switch because they're not LED lights.
Yep.
And there are some flags and banners and pictures and other things, but we have about 2,000 items that we have to change from one team to the next for that brand, and approximately 800 of those are done by hand. The rest of it is done electronically. So, as you stated, the video boards, the ribbon boards, a lot of the experiences throughout the whole facility. Most of our building partners, which are our big sponsors, have their own video boards as well. And collectively, it really makes for a great fan experience. And you think about the fans today, and they're using a lot of these different technologies in their homes and in their businesses. We've got to be on the cutting edge with all those types of electronics, so that when they come here, they're familiar with it. And in many cases, it might be one of our 2,200 television sets that gets them excited. It might be our large video boards. It might be the fascia, ribbon boards that, for example, some of those are set specifically to give you the out-of-town scores and or the fantasy.
Yep.
Numbers while you're still enjoying the football game that's taking place in the stadium.
So last year, the massive focus was getting ready for the Super Bowl. But as you said earlier, with phone technology being upgraded all the time, and the demands that fans have using those phones keep growing, what's the main challenges that you're facing and you're looking to improve over the next 18 months, 2 years at MetLife, to just, I guess, keep your head above water to a certain degree? But what are the main things you're looking to improve with the stadium?
It's interesting that you bring that up, because we're in the process right now of creating a 5-year capital expenditure budget to deal with technologies, and some of that is maintenance and upgrade. When you purchase certain systems, they have a certain shelf life before technology passes it by.
Yep.
So some of that is just keeping up with where you're at now to maintain where you are with the intent to grow. But a lot of it too is that growth that you have to take care of and you have to pay attention to. So we're putting all of those projects and numbers together to take to our ownership and see what kind of an appetite that they have, where they want to spend the money and what they want to do. But, one of the things that we're beginning to focus on is the traffic. When you bring 27,000 cars in to one certain location, is getting them the messages to make that ingress and egress much more palatable for them. And so we've been having some discussions with different companies on putting together signage systems that will be in real time that can give them guidance and direction. And, we've had some events where an accident or construction on a particular highway close to the stadium may be slowing down the traffic. And, right now we use our social media platforms to get the word out to everybody, but there's some people that may not be on the platforms that we're sending that out on. So having electronic signage to help guide and direct them where they can reroute to get out of the stadium quicker is something that we're beginning to focus on. But then on the other side too, the growth of all these different social platforms and figuring out where all of that is going is a challenge for us to know that our guests, when they come here, are going to have access to all of that, not only with the amount of Wi-Fi connectivity we have, but also working with our cellular companies, because many people still are using that cellular system, especially when they get outside of the stadium and get into their vehicles. Then it turns into the cellular antennas as opposed to the access points from the Wi-Fi. So coordinating all of those efforts and expanding outside of the stadium itself is a direction that we're looking at.
Well, 5 years, that is a long time in technology. If you just even look back at some of the technology you were rolling out at American Airlines Center when I was there to see Dirk Nowitzki, it's something that's always changing. I always look back at Moore's Law, which is history of computing, that says the computing power doubles every 2 years. We're seeing that same sort of growth in everything mobile and what fans are doing. So it's a real challenge to say what's it going to look like in 5 years' time.
It is, and so our plan is that we create this 5-year plan, and every year we will adjust it and continue to look at what the opportunities are going to be, and of course make sure that we're keeping up with all the needs of the users. And one thing we didn't talk about is there's a lot of technologies that are being used by the teams, whether it's the communication to the coaches, whether it's the the new tablets that are on the sidelines for medical updates and information as they deal with the player injuries, whether it's the stats that they're looking for. It's not only the guests who are coming, it's the operation of the stadium and, that competitive advantage that the teams are always looking for, so that they can give the tools to their players that they otherwise haven't had in the past. So, yeah, definitely. I mean, you've got the new service tablets, the Microsoft partnership with the NFL, with all the coaches using them, and then on top of that, you've got a lot of the player tracking devices and data that is pulling in GPS and giving the coaches access to what the players are doing from how much running and force and those kind of things. So that data requirement of the teams and the on-field talent need is only going to continue to grow as that analytics side of the game continues to grow. And we're seeing the same thing with the media. When we designed the American Airlines Center, we had a dark room in the media center. Nobody is using film these days. It's all digital. And what are they doing? They're sending the digital signals of all those pictures immediately along with their stories, as opposed to going back to their offices and getting everything set up for their reports. So as technology continues to grow, all of us in the sports and entertainment industry are going to continue to spend the money to keep up with all the new technologies and everything that really enhances our lives, as well as our ability to deliver what the guest is looking for.
Yeah, definitely. Well, MetLife Stadium is on my list of stadiums to attend. I've been to a few NFL stadiums and haven't been lucky enough to go out to MetLife, so it's definitely on the list. Whether I make it there this season or next one, I definitely will make it there, and looking forward to catching up with you when I do.
Well, Sean, we would love to have you. It was a great experience meeting you in Dallas, and I've got a bigger and better toy to play with here in the New York market than I had there in Dallas, because it's not that it's any better than American Airlines Center, which is one of the elite facilities in the country, but the enormity of this one being in the largest market, being the busiest stadium in the world, there's a lot of things for us to brag about and show off to you. So we'd love to have you.
Oh, definitely. As long as you don't have any Fosters on ice, get me some of those good New York craft beers or something from New York or New Jersey. I'll be happy to. As I told you that night, we Aussies, we don't drink Fosters. We just send it to everybody else. But we're more than happy to drink. Yeah, exactly. I'm more happy to oblige and drink it just to be polite. But we don't drink Fosters. We're very much more of a beer snob, or at least I am anyway.
I've learned that is one thing I will say is we've had an incredible number of Australians that have come here and come to the facility, and in fact, Daktronics is bringing in a group of people for the game on Sunday.
Yep.
With the Broncos and the Jets. So great people, and we love having Australians come here, and they share information with us. We share information with them, and it really works out well for all of us.
Well, terrific. And next time you'll have to come down to Australia and check out some of the stadiums down here. Work out a way to get you down to Australia, and I can buy you a beer.
There you go. I love it.
Thank you very much for coming on the podcast. Best of luck for the rest of the NFL season, and hope to catch up with you soon.
Sean, that'd be fantastic. Thank you so much. Sign up for Sports Geek News at sportsgeekhq.com/sign up now.
Thanks again to Brad Mayne from MetLife Stadium. You can connect with Brad on Twitter at Brad Mayne, and that's pretty much how I connect with Brad initially back in 2010 when trying to make those connections on my first Sports Geek trip. I'll share a link to that night at American Airlines Center and sort of how that went down in the show notes. Thanks again to Brad. I did get some feedback during the week, both from the Mark Cuban podcast and also people who have been listening prior to that, and they did note how many times I start off my podcast with very happy to introduce and very happy to have people on. I actually did a Google search on very happy and Sports Geek, and yes, I pretty much use it every single time. But it does come from truth. I am very happy to have those people on the show, and I'm very happy to be able to call them my friends. So whether it becomes a T-shirt, I don't know. I start off Beers Blokes Business with "Shut up, you blokes," and I think I start off every interview with Sports Geek with "very happy to talk to." So just talking from the heart in that sense. I want to talk a little bit about the NRL Grand Final. I was lucky enough to go up to the NRL Grand Final last Sunday, where the South Sydney Rabbitohs, who've been a client since 2011, took on the Canterbury Bulldogs. So it's the first time I've ever been to an NRL Grand Final. And the whole day was pretty much a Sports Geek nightmare with a happy ending. So to give you a bit of a rundown of my day, I was able to get a flight up on the Sunday. It was a 7 o'clock flight. Daylight savings just kicked in. So effectively I got up at 4 a.m. To be able to get to the airport and fly out. But it was really, wasn't too fussed about that. Just getting up there and getting to the hotel and waiting for the game later on that night. but the day turned worse. And what would be the worst thing that could happen to a sports geek heading to a major event, and especially one that you want to participate in? My phone died. So my Samsung S3 that now I'm a big Android guy. Really like what it offers from a flexibility and being able to share with different platforms. I was giving some weird messages about not having enough space, some storage problems. So I deleted some old podcasts that I'd listened to and some photos and the like. Thought I'd fix the problem. It was a bit glitchy, so I just thought I'll do the whole have you turn it off and turn it on problem, which is a common IT crowd joke, and it's one that I know from my IT days. So I turned it off, turned it back on, and it would not start again. And you do not know how much your mobile phone is like your arm. I felt pretty much hopeless in Sydney. I know my way around Sydney enough, but I didn't know where the closest Telstra store was. So ironically, I did know where the Apple store was. So I walked up to the Apple store and Googled the problem, and also Googled where the nearest Telstra store was. And it was actually just next door. I went in, and in the end, the main result was to completely wipe the phone and reset it. Was the only solution. So then I was left with a phone with no apps, no contacts, no phone numbers. So I hurriedly went back to the hotel, and it really both the time constraints and the panic really makes you install the absolute must install app. So I thought I'd just take you through the sort of the process that I had to go through. I installed some of the vital things. I updated the app. I installed apps like Dropbox to make sure everything was backing up again. And then I also installed Google Plus. You should have Google Plus installed, if for nothing else, to automatically back up your photos via Wi-Fi. And then the other benefit is you get the bonus Auto Awesome photos. So once I installed Google and got Dropbox working again to have that double backup, which didn't really make me concerned that I wiped my phone. I didn't lose anything. And then I connected 1Password, which is a crucial tool. It maintains all my passwords and makes sure that they're different for every service. If you're using the same password for multiple services, it only takes one of those services to get hacked, and all of the services can be hacked. So if you're not using multiple passwords, then I had to reconnect all my key platforms, so Facebook and Twitter and the like. I've got two-factor authentication on all of my platforms, so I was getting verification codes texted through to my phone. Again, annoying in the setup mode and when you're trying to get it done, but absolutely vital from a security point of view. You don't want to have someone else getting access to your accounts. And then I also installed Aviate, which is my preferred Android launcher, as it provides contextual apps. So if I'm on the road, it provides me travel apps. If I'm at home, it provides me certain apps that I'm at home. It provides me different apps when I'm in the office, so it knows where I am. And if you're using Android and you're looking for a launcher and you're not quite sure, you don't like what you get out of the box, I highly recommend getting Aviate. So I got most of the things that I needed set up and headed into ANZ Stadium. I was very thankful that they had some usable Wi-Fi, that I was able to get a few of the last things connected. And other than that, I got everything working again. As far as the NRL Grand Final went, really enjoyed it. The pre-game music and stuff was a little bit lackluster. Having Slash perform, I think it was 2.5 songs with no band, was a little bit strange and a little bit awkward with the Telstra logo sort of plastered everywhere around him. But other than that, I thought once the music entertainment was out of the way, I thought the way that both the teams were introduced, I really enjoyed, and I posted it on my Facebook page, facebook.com/Sean Callanan Speaks, was the ringing of the foundation bell. For those who don't know, foundation bell was first rung at the first rugby league game. Russell Crowe, the Oscar-winning actor and also co-owner of the Rabbitohs, bought bought the bell for $82,000 and vowed it would return when the Rabbitohs were in the grand final. So it's been a long comeback for the Rabbitohs. They were thrown out of the league and then brought back in the league, and then Russell Crowe and Pete Holmes at Court came in as owners and backed the club. And to get back, it's a terrific comeback story. And there's even rumours that it may become a movie. That might be a little bit far fetched, but the foundation bell was rung, and then the fans started singing "Glory, Glory" to South Sydney, and it was spine tingling stuff. I was able to get out a few tweets during the game. Normally, when a game is packed with fans and a stadium is packed with fans, and as I sort of said there with Brad, the stadiums are looking to upgrade the Wi-Fi, but even at some point it does get, if you don't have the infrastructure there, you can't get access. One of the tips that I always do is if I can't get access to the Wi-Fi, normally the 4G will be action-packed. That's where everyone's trying to get access to. Try to dial down which band you're on. So either drop down to 3G or even better, drop down to the edge. It's a tip I'm only going to share with you as podcast listeners. I don't want everyone to know this because if you're on the edge, no one else is on the edge, and you're able to get a tweet out every now and again. So I was able to get out a few posts during the game and also a congratulations post at the end of the game, thankfully, because I was using the edge. So that clock there tells me it is time to wrap up this podcast and let you get back to your day. As I said earlier in the podcast, send me a tweet. Let me know that you're listening to the podcast. I'm more than happy to follow back and chat with people who are listening. At Sean Callanan is my Twitter handle, SeanCallanan, and also Sports Geek on Twitter. And if you're on Cyberdust and you want to chat about all things sports digital, or you want a bit more insight into what I do, Sean Callanan on Cyberdust. Just send me a message. Been playing around with the Blast feature in sending pictures out and sending links out and seeing how it's used. I use it with a few friends of mine and getting a bit of use out of it. That's it for this episode of the Sports Geek podcast. Stay tuned after the credits. Sounds of the game is Greg Inglis, Rabbitohs superstar, scoring the last try of the game in the last 30 seconds. And just listen, you can actually hear the joy in the cheering of the Rabbitohs fans. Until next week, my name is Sean Callanan from sportsgeekhq.com. If I can help your team, your league, or your stadium with anything in the sports digital space, need help with strategy and development and fan engagement initiatives, please drop me an email, sean@sportsgeekhq.com. Thanks for listening.
Check out which teams work with SportsGeek at sportsgeekhq.com/clients. Find all SportsGeek podcasts at sportsgeekhq.com/SGP. Send in your sounds of the game. Email Sean@sportsgeekhq.com. Thanks for listening to the Sports Geek Podcast.